we get a little crazier. And I was listening to the radio the other day as I was driving, and it was so crazy. The announcer on the radio said, "I'm going to let you listen to this woman and explain it." He said, "Because I can't even imagine it. A lady is suing her mom and dad for having her because they didn't get her permission to have her." And she said if she had known that they was going to have her, she wouldn't have been here because she didn't like paying taxes and working and dealing with all this. And so they asked her, said, "Well, how was your mom and dad supposed to ask permission?" She said they should have went to a psychic and found out something about what I wanted before they had me. Now, folks, I thought I'd heard about all of it. She's adopted 2 kids because she said I asked them if they wanted to be here. Well, she didn't go there and stuff. But, folks, I just can't fathom where they come up with this stuff. But it's when you think you've kind of got to the end of crazy, somebody else comes up with one even. But the announcer, he said, "You're not going to believe me, so I'm going to let you listen to her." And he played her tape of her explaining that. Anyway, let's go back a little bit. Let's get into Exodus. Sometimes I don't know if they're much smarter than we got them today. But our kids they're hearing this stuff. They're being faced with it. And that bothers me. And so your grandkids and your children, they better be grounded in the Word. I spent time with Brody yesterday, and the things, this boy is fixing to turn 12 next week, and he's dealing with fuzzies, trans, and all this, and he just finished the 6th grade. Now, folks, I don't know when I was in the 6th grade, we didn't have any idea what any of that was. Huh? And there, I mean, here's a boy that's not 12 years old being face to face with all this. And I asked him, I said, "Well, what about it?" He said, "Man, I don't believe in any of that, Papa." But what about these kids that are not scripturally based? And so, first of all, these kids need to know they're a creation by God and they're special. No matter where they're from or what they're doing, God has a plan for them. And they need to live up to that and enjoy that and be a part of that. And then they're being groomed into believing these lies, and it's scary. So you better teach these kids and let them know the foundation. And people say, "Well, God loves everybody." He does, but He doesn't accept what everybody does. He's very disciplined in what He accepts and stuff. Love is not accepting everybody doing whatever they want. That's not true love. My mom and daddy true loved me enough to put a belt where it needed to be every now and then. It wasn't around your waist, it was a little bit lower. But that was love because they wanted me to grow up and have some sense. But God's the same way. He lays out things. He does love everybody, but He's not tolerant of everything. And so people need to know the truth of the Word because they're being deceived by that enemy. All right, chapter 15, we're going to begin in verse 22 as God provides for the nation of Israel in this journey. And what I think is important about these scriptures we're going to look now, because when you're on your spiritual walk in your journey, there's going to be times when God's going to let you get right up to a place where things look like you're at a dead end. And God's trying to grow them in their faith, just like He's trying to grow you. So in verse 22, it talks about, then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days into the wilderness and found no water. Now, when we looked at the journey the other day and down in that area, the Sinai Peninsula is mostly sand, desert. If you go across parts of West Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, you find water in a few places, but it's long periods in between. They're walking and moving. Oh, probably somewhere around 1.5 million of them. Takes a lot of water for them. Did God know they needed water? Okay, He knew. He's leading them there, but He's also letting them suffer and struggle because He's trying to develop their faith. So they get to the water, and when they came to this place called Marah, they could not drink the waters of Marah, for they found they were bitter, alkaline and very salt and things. Water in desert area a lot of times is bitter from minerals that's in it and everything. And no matter how thirsty you are, it can be poisonous to you. But this water was bitter. Didn't want to drink it. Any of you drink a lot of heavy? I know what y'all know. If you're raised in East Texas, how many of you drinking some iron ore water? That red Kool-Aid that come out of that big old rock whale that your grandpa had, lined with iron ore rocks around there, and it looked like orange Kool-Aid. Folks, when you drank that, you would need to drink real bad. And you didn't want a lot of it. You just wanted what it took. Same way you get to West Texas, that old alkaline water out there, some of it's pretty bad. So they got there. What they going to do? Well, they grumbled. That's the first thing you want to do. We're going to get mad at Moses. We're going to get mad at God. We're going to grumble and gripe a little bit. That solves everything, doesn't it? You know, we're growing in our faith, so we're going to grumble and get mad at God. And that's exactly what they did there in verse 24. The people grumbled at Moses and said, what shall we drink? Moses didn't know, so he just cries out to the Lord. He might not have had all the answers, but he knew who did. And this is where God really tries to point them to trust Him. He showed Moses a tree. He told him, He said, throw it into the waters, and the waters became sweet. I don't know what kind of tree that was, but undoubtedly, now you got to think about Moses. He'd spent 40 years in the wilderness grazing sheep. If he was to know anything about some special tree, he would have known. So this was not what you would call a natural thing that they knew. This is a God thing. This is not a human thing. This is a God thing. And he said, throw that little tree. Now, we're not talking about a pine tree, folks. We're talking about some big, a small tree that he could cut down and toss it in by hand. It wasn't a log. I mean, it'd be a scrub brush for us here in East Texas. But he threw it in there, and immediately the water became sweet. That's a miracle. So what would God be trying to teach these people right here? If you go where God tells you, and even when it looks like He doesn't know what He's doing, He's getting you to a place where He's fixing to show you something new. And He wants you to stand out and just stand up and say, okay, God, you got this. But the problem is most people never get there in their faith. They grumble. God's already carried them through the Red Sea. He's already drowned the Egyptian army. He's done all these things, and what did they learn from it? Yeah, they started out grumbling, they were still grumbling. And that's what's amazing to me, how blind people can be when God's doing a mighty work right around you and you not learn from it. Folks, I wish I could explain why those things happen, but these people didn't do much better for the next several chapters, but they're doing it today. God does a mighty work and delivers them out of a deal, and they said, okay, and then as soon as something else happened, well, God don't even hear my prayers anymore. He doesn't do this. He didn't. Folks, you've got to walk with Him and trust Him, because this generation has got some, we think it's bad right now with this idiots. What's going to happen when all these people are in charge of the entire government? Because that's what comes up every time we have an election. We get more and more of this type of stuff, and more of it's being happening. You're not very far from becoming the minority in the world where your beliefs won't matter. We've got people wanting to kill every cow in the world right now because they pass gas. I've yet to see a cow toot like that. And just from what they're saying, they do. But they're wanting to kill them because they produce methane gas. Well, I want to eat mine. Let them produce all the methane they have. And I want that milk. I want that dairy products. I want that beef and all that. But they want y'all to eat grasshoppers. Now, they'll promise you they'll eat their T-bones and their ribeyes, but you won't. And they try to convince you they're bad for you. They're bad for the environment. Don't go there, Dwayne. I mean, if we're going to get rid of some things, maybe we ought to get rid of some of these nuts and keep the cows. But you see how, I know it. I don't care if they're hearing me, they're okay. But it's like people never learn that God's in control of the climate. He knows where it's going. He's going to redo it one day. We're safe, folks, until He comes back. We're not going to self-destruct. Some humans going to be here when Jesus comes back. And when the final day comes, humans are still going to be here until He takes them all out and destroys it. So climate change is not going to be the problem. The problem is sin and lack of faith. Now that's the problem. And it's becoming more and more rampant. But we don't need to follow this example of grumbling and griping. We need to follow the example of being like Moses and going to the source and saying, God, we want to see you work. We're going to trust you. We're going to let you do what you need to do. And then we're going to be bold in that and stuff. And because here's your evidence. He can do this. And if He did it for them, He'll do it for you. Verse 26. If you will give earnest, now look at this. This is a good part. If you will give earnest heed to the voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in His sight, and give ear to His commandments, and keep all His statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you which I've put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord, I am your healer. He's given them a promise as a people in a special time to be obedient and walk with Him and keep Him as a nation and to be holy. And the things that He's plagued Israel with will not be plagues upon them. He's trying to tell them basically, shut up, watch me, follow me, and you'll be all right. But you're doing just like people who don't have faith. You're grumbling and griping and not allowing God to work. And that's just so typical of so many human beings. It's typical of a lot of churches. It's why they never really grow spiritually, because they don't ever walk and step out and act in faith. And that's always a challenge in any church, is to get your people to go a little further, because they get comfortable. We buy these nice chairs and sit there so you can be comfortable. But I want you comfortable while you're learning so you can get up and go and do. But people need to learn to walk with God every day. And so whatever you're facing, whether it's cancer or sickness or death or financial or whatever, be obedient to His Word, and He'll take care of you. I know when I was learning to tithe and do all that, and money was tight, and people said, well, won't you cut out the tithe? I said, no. If I might cut something out, but it ain't going to be the tithe, because that's what God wants me to give. And what He showed me was that you keep faithful in that giving to Him, and He'll bless you as you learn this lesson. And you'll find out this money shows up when you need it. If you're being faithful, you'll be amazed at sometimes where it just shows up out of the blue. And God will take care of you. Now, sometimes it doesn't show up. It's because God's trying to get you got to make some adjustments too. I mean, it's not a blank check, okay? That's what gets me mad about people say, well, I tithe and stuff, and I can't buy that new car. Well, maybe you don't need a new car. There was a pickup. Let me throw this in. When they delivered the bus this morning, there was a Dodge pickup sitting up in front of that, and that driver said, you know how much that truck is? I said, I have no idea. He said $120,000. He said it was an $84,000 truck, and they put $30-something thousand in a lift kit to pick it up and put big tires on it. I said, and it'll never see the mud. $120,000 for a 3/4 ton pickup going to Oklahoma City. So sometimes God says, maybe you ought to cut back on some of these things. If you've got the money, all right, but that could get real serious into a man's budget right there. And but sometimes God does that. I mean, I know in my life, Barbara, I had to make some adjustments because he's setting your priorities. And then when you get them kind of where they need to be, then He starts taking care of those things. And then He starts giving you things that you don't necessarily think you've got to have. The blessings start coming. But He's made you make some adjustments to see if you're going to be faithful. And that's what He does. And that's what He's teaching us, is to learn to trust Him in those areas. And then finally in verse 27 He said, then they came to Elim, where there was 12 springs of water and 70 date palms, and they camped there beside the water. Now this is 12 springs of water and 70 date palms. So fruit, water, place to rest, but they had to go through the bitter waters to get to the sweet water. And when you get there, then God gives you a break. He said, okay, rest up, heal up, reevaluate what I've done before I go the next step, because they're about to run out of food. But see, God blesses them at that point for a period of time, and then He takes them one step further. That's how you grow faith, one step at a time. And when you take that big step, He doesn't hit you right off the bat with another one. He gives you a time to settle in, rest up, and then He comes right with that next step. Let's go further. And that's exactly the way He works right here, and that's the way He still works in our lives today. He carries us up there to trust Him in this area. Then you get this time of rest and this time of healing and blessing. And then we go into chapter 16, verse 3. They begin to run out of bread, water. Not water, but the bread and food and stuff. Go right back, verse 3. Would we that we had died in the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by these pots of meat, and we ate bread to the full, for you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill us, this whole assembly, with hunger. Did they not just come out of some slavery where they was working all day long making brick and most of the night to gather straw? I don't remember this picnic that they were on there where they had all this meat in the pots and bread galore, and they just sat around just eating all this good stuff. But that's what they think. How quickly they've forgotten the hardships of slavery and all the things they wanted delivered from, and now as soon as things get a little rough, oh, I wish we were back. Be careful when you go to thinking you wished you were back where you were. Any of you want to go back to when you were prior to your salvation? Lord, help me. My biggest regret in life is that I was the age I was when I got saved. I wished I'd got saved about 20 years younger. I sure don't want to go back to that emptiness, because I remind myself of where I was at and how many folks, I don't know about you, but in my life I can count the times that God should have killed me and could have, way before I ever knew Him. You couldn't count them all on this many hands. Those are the ones I know of. I liked a 1/4 inch cut in a jugular vein there one time fighting barbed wire. I liked an inch the next time I fought with barbed wire. Jumped off cliffs, car wrecks, turned boats over in the river with your hip waders on. Carla's brother was with me on that one. We both should have drowned in that one. Just time and time again, and He spared me. And I didn't have time for it. But that's the way we get. We go to remembering something that's not there. So here's God's mercy. Verse 4. Lord said to Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them whether whether or not they will walk in my instruction. On the 6th day, when they prepare what they are to bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. What's he talking about there? The manna's coming down. You were to gather up enough for your family for one day. In other words, you got to trust God every day for His provision. If you gathered too much, it was ruined. If you only gathered an Omar was a bushel basket, and they was to gather that much. But if they only gathered a half, maybe they were old or weak, it was still it was a miracle in that, because it fed the whole family, even though they didn't gather as much as they should have. But they weren't to gather more than the Omar either, because then they tried to save it and it would ruin, until the sixth day, when they were to gather up 2 bushels of the manna, so they wouldn't have to gather it on the Sabbath, and it would last. And so God's saying, you trust me every day. I'm going to grow your faith. You got to trust me, and it would work. Now, folks, I wasn't there, but manna, from what most people think was a flake about the size of your little finger, a little wafer type deal. And to gather up a bushel basket of it, it meant it was probably quite a bit of it on the ground. Because they said it looked like frost in the morning time, and it just covered the ground. And then it would melt away. So you had to go out early. Marcy, you couldn't sleep till 10 o'clock. Stuff. You had to get out there and get there with daylight and stuff. And you had to gather it up. And then you had to start making your bread and doing what you was doing with it. But now a bushel basket, that's a lot of manna. And I don't know how they did it. They rolled it out like grain, but they made bread out of it and it sustained them. But they had to do that every day. Do you not have to get up every day and trust God right now? Or do you get up every day and trust in your job? Any of you ever been laid off from a job or fired or run off or stuff? You know, go ahead and put your faith in there. Just wait and see what happens. Sooner or later, it'll collapse, they'll lay off, fire you, send you home. And there's no, used to be there's no social net, but now there's unemployment and things like that. But mine was in construction, it'd go to raining. And I didn't have any unemployment. It just rained every day for weeks on end. Every time it started drying, it'd rain some more. People at the unemployment say, well, check with this company. I said, fella, I said, when it rains, dirt work is over till it dries up. But you know, God carried me through those days, and I was learning to trust Him. And then if you're self-employed, you are out there trusting in Him every day, because you don't know whether you got a paycheck. Brad, you ever have trust in God? We was talking about gambling one time. Brad said, put $40,000 worth of fertilizer out and then hope God gives you the rain to make it grow. He said, it didn't need to go to the casino. He said, it's laying out there. But people don't understand that about agriculture, that when you plant a crop, you put fertilizer and you do all that, you burn all that diesel, you put all that work into it. And it won't do a thing if God doesn't give you the rain. And then even when it's growing, then you hope it don't hail when it rains. Or like my corn crop, and you're laying down. I mean, if I would depend on it for money, I'd just be out of luck. Looking good. Likes about 2 weeks. You got to trust God in everything you do. And that's what He was trying to get the Israelites to do on this journey. Some of them would, some of them wouldn't. We're not too far away from getting a hold of some that thought they were so smart they would just shove old Moses out of the way and they'd just take them all back to Egypt. It didn't turn out too good for them. But don't ever read the Exodus or the Old Testament in a completely historical sense. Read it in a historical sense that God's saying, this is how I act, this is the way I work, and this is the way people respond. And then apply that to your life so you know what to do and what not to do. Learn from their mistakes and realize God still works the same way he did there. He can still provide manna. He can still provide water. He can still provide protection. So whatever the world's got for us, as long as you're drawing a breath, God knows where you're at, if you're His, and He can take care of you. And if man kills you, what have you got to fear? Huh? Now think about that. Because people think I'm crazy when I tell them, I said, if man kills me, I'm with the Lord. If I live, I'm with the Lord. So what can He do to me that I should be afraid of? He can't shorten my life, because my life is the Lord, and I'm going to live for eternity. He may shorten this body's life, but this thing's going to die on its own. And at most, if according to my predecessors, I've got 20 years, 22 years at the most. Most of my family on both sides died in their 70s. And so just a few of them lived into their 80s. So at the most, I'm 3/4 done. I'm just almost well done. So, but the problem is, John, I'm going to live forever. And I believe that. So I'm not worried about the death. Huh? That's right. Something way better. When you're washed in the blood, you can have that security. And that's what it's all about. But your faith has got to get you to that point. Because a lot of people say, oh, I believe. I'm just not ready to go. Well, you better be. Because you could go. Steve Nicks said he just had a heart attack and died. The guy that got run over by the train the other night, he better have been ready. You could leave here, have a heart attack or have a car wreck or whatever. Huh? Those two, they couldn't find a way to spell kill, much less do it. They can't even get their facts right about who died off. But anyway, they meant well. They meant well. And it wouldn't be the first time. I died one time sitting in the hospital too. I was supposed to have been dead. But rumors do get spread around Naples and Omaha. And Bill is like 92, I think. 91. So, yeah, so he is getting on up there, and his health has been bad. So, so anyway, all right, time to go. The kids are all out. Father, we thank you for loving us. I pray that we can learn a little more about you every time we read this word. And I pray that we'd learn not to make the mistakes the Israelites made. That as you grow our faith, we will listen. And that when it comes time that you're stretching that faith, that we won't grumble, but we'll say, what is it that we need to know? That we trust you to take care of this situation. And we know you will. And Father, just watch over these people as they go out this week. We got some on vacations and traveling. Be with Barbara and I as we go and relax a little bit. And I do pray that you bring us some more rain to this area to help our grass grow and carry us on into this summer, that we can produce what we need to sustain ourselves with our food. We ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen. Y'all go out there and make a difference.